Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Apologies that my Estonian is not good and this has to be in English, so thank you very much. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Feel free to turn on your cameras or to write any chat in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on it, and we can answer questions as we go through, and we can also come to them at the end as well. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for joining. I hear that Estonia is actually opening up and restaurants are opening again. So I appreciate that you're coming to watch this and not enjoying your newfound freedoms. So yeah, my name's Emma Haynes. So I'm here on behalf of Smartbox today, in case the T-shirt didn't give it away. Um, so I have worked for Smartbox for the past about 4.5 years, coming up to 5 years. Um, so I started out in the support team at Smartbox, supporting users, therapists, teachers, parents, carers, users themselves all over the world to get the most from Smartbox products, whether that's devices or our software. Um, so I'm going to be, um, I've moved recently in the last 2 years to our global partner team. So now I have the privilege of working with various partners around the world, again, to get the best from our products. So I'm here with Eva today to see how we can really help with our products in Estonia. So I'm really excited and I'm hopefully going to get to know a bit more about you guys and extend my contact details to you if there's anything you'd like to talk about or see how we can support you better with our products. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to go into a little bit about Smartbox shortly. But this talk is to give you a flavour of the kind of work that we do, how our products can help. And like I said, feel free to ask questions as we go through and we can make this nice and interactive. I'm sure we've sat on a lot of video calls, so please feel free to join in and make this as interesting as possible and beneficial for you. Okay. So I'm going to look a little bit about who Smartbox are and what we do. We're going to look at a few different case studies, different individuals and how the Smartbox products have been applied to help them help meet their needs. And we're going to look at how Grid in particular, our software, helps meet their needs. We're going to look at Grid itself. We're going to do a little bit of a tour of Grid itself and see how easy it is to edit, how easy it is to work with, and look at some of the translations that have been done already. And then we're going to finish it off with a little bit of a competition where all it requires is you to just answer a few questions about the presentation so we can get a bit of feedback from you. And then you'll be in with the opportunity of winning a copy of Grid. So that's a little bit of excitement that we'll save to the end, hopefully. You're all still tuned in. Okay. So Smartbox are an assistive technology company. We're based in the UK. So we were set up by a family. The gentleman Paul and his wife Alison set up the company in their basement in their house. They first started developing random setups for individuals with various disabilities to help them access a computer, to help them communicate, and to access the world around them, basically, with various different setups that we look back on now and think, wow, how was that ever useful for anybody? But we've come a long way since then. So it's actually still quite a family-based company. So Paul's son, who originally set up the company, is now the managing director of the company. So Yeah, he's been able to see it evolve over those 20 years or so. And so seen our hardware develop and our software develop. And we're going to look a little bit at what those look like now, um, and how they've developed. And we've used all of that experience over the years to make sure that we've got a really, really good product offering for individuals. So we are creators of the Grid software. So if you're not familiar with Grid, that's what we're going to focus on today. But our communication software is world leading. It's one of the, well, it is the market leading AAC software. So we're very proud of that. There's about 70 of us in total. So that ranges from development teams, so the people that develop the software, people that develop the hardware and the content, which we're going to take a look at, from marketing teams to admin teams. Yeah, there's a big team of us in the UK, and then we also have a smaller office in the US. And then we also operate through a partner network. So I've mentioned that these products are available internationally. So we have a wide range of partners which are all over the globe. I think over 30 different countries we sell into. So obviously in Estonia, we are working with Invaru to bring these products to you. Okay. And that's just a little bit of a picture to give you an idea. This is outside our head office in Malvern, which actually Eva has actually been to visit us at. And that's obviously before COVID, when we could actually stand next to each other. Um, so it's a couple of years old now, but that's the team at our head office in Malvern. So we kind of break down the products that we have at Smartbox into three sections. So we have our hardware range. So we do a whole range of hardware to suit lots of different disabilities and access requirements. So that starts with our dedicated range, which is the GridPad. And these are a range of AAC devices which are designed specifically for communication. So we actually design and manufacture these devices ourselves. Um, and like I said, over those 20 years of experience, we've learned all the things that AAC users need from a device, such as battery life, such as robustness. We know that devices get mounted and also put in bags. So we make them really rugged with loud speech to come out of the device. So yeah, our dedicated range is called the GridPads. We have TalkPads, which is based on the iPad range. And then we also have TouchPad, which is more the adapted mainstream tablet range. Software, which is what we're going to focus on today, Grid 3. We're going to take a look at the AAC software that is Grid and how that works and how we can make adaptations to that. Grid for iPad, which is the iOS version of Grid. And then also Look to Learn, which is our access, entry-level access software, which allows people to learn how to use eye gaze through the medium of games. So cause and effect games, etc. To really introduce users to that, to their access methods and getting used to eye gaze. And then we also have content, which we're going to cover also today because it's obviously really important. It's amazing that we have this really powerful software, but without the content that is available for people to use for communication, use for accessible apps, to connect their phone, to connect their email, that's the vital part also. So we'll take a deeper look at that shortly. I'm just trying to be wary. I don't think we've got any questions so far, but like I said, please feel free to chip in. So this is what the hardware range looks like with our dedicated range here at the front, the grid pads, and then we've got the talk pads based on the iPads on the left-hand side and the touchpad on the right-hand side. If anybody wants to understand or learn any more about our hardware range, please feel free to reach out. But today we're going to be focusing on software. Okay. So grid. So grid was, oh, wrong one. Grid was released in 2015. So the software has been around for a number of years now. We release monthly updates of Grid. So once you've bought Grid, oh, is it showing both windows now? Can you see that screen okay still? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it was released in 2015. The software is available as an entire package. So once you've bought the software, you have the license for it. We then release monthly or 4 to 6 weeks, we release updates. So since we released Grid in 2015, you can imagine if there's monthly updates, it's adapted and come on quite a lot. So that includes updates to content, updates to functionality. So we're adding and updating Grid all the time. And once you have a Grid license, that is something that becomes part of it. It's the world leading AAC software, provided into, like I said, 31 different countries. Translations is something that we are providing all the time. Like I said, we're going to be working on Envaro's translations, and you'll see some of the translations shortly, but that is something that we will continue to release all of the time. And if you work with any users that are bilingual, we already have over 21 complete languages available. So for users that use perhaps English in another language or Estonian in another language, there is the opportunity to swap between languages also. We have over 10,000 new Grid users every year. So the Grid community is growing and increasing all the time. And with that is an online community of people sharing their experiences, sharing Grid sets that they've made within Grid, content that they've made within Grid. So it's a really powerful resource, not in itself, but also the community that brings with it. So what is Grid? Grid 3 is a powerful piece of software that works on Windows devices. Like I said, we also have the iPad offering, and we're going to focus on the Grid 3 Windows version today. So it empowers people with disabilities to communicate, control their environment, and access their computer. And we're going to look at some case studies in a moment of individuals that we've worked with to see how the different features that Grid 3 has enables them to communicate, enables them to control their environment and access their computer, to give you some real life experiences of how Grid 3 works for those individuals, and hopefully you can apply it to the individuals that you're working with also. But just to give you some examples of conditions that people may have is ALS, autism, people with cerebral palsy, people with brain injuries like strokes, Down syndrome. So it works with a whole variety of different disabilities. And its flexibility really is its strength, in that we can change things within Grid to suit the individual and their access requirements. So even though it's aimed at so many different individuals, it still allows so much functionality, and you'll see that as we go through in terms of exactly what that functionality means for each user. Okay. So we're going to look at the case studies now. Just so that you're aware, we've used some images of our users, but they're not actually the images of that these case studies are based on, just so you're aware. Okay. So this is Martin. So Martin is 63 years old, and he lives with his wife and his 2 dogs. And he was sadly diagnosed with ALS 7 months ago. So as you can imagine, when we came into Martin's life and introduced him to assistive technology in general, it's quite a tough time. He's just found out that he's got a terminal illness, and physically he is deteriorating in terms of his physical access, in terms of his speech, in terms of what he's able to do on a day-to-day basis, and he's all of that physically going on, and then emotionally he's got his family and friends around him that are coming to grips also, and the emotional turmoil that comes with that. So when we spoke to Martin about some of the things that we could support him with, we determined that his priorities were the following. So um, Martin has two sons that he wanted to continue to be able to communicate with. So he uses a number of different methods currently. So he was using a phone to talk to them over the phone, but he also texted them. And he still wanted to be able to do that, particularly as they don't live very close by. So he needed to be able to continue to phone them and text them. He also wanted to maintain the relationship with his wife. They've been married, I don't know how many years, but quite a few years. And obviously, his illness is putting a huge strain on their relationship, and he wanted to be able to continue to have, to be able to talk and say things the way he used to talk to her, and wanted to know how we could support him with that. And that kind of links in with talking to his dogs as well. So Martin loves his dogs, and he wanted to be able to command them around the house. You know, he doesn't want to have to depend on his wife to come and tell the dogs to move, or to take them out for a wee, or do all the things that come with looking after dogs. So he wanted to maintain his independence with the dogs also. And then one thing that he was really, really avidly interested in was football. And he was actually really frustrated about his ability to check the football scores. So that was something that we really wanted to be able to support him with, and we could do that quite easily. And I'll show you how in a moment. And then finally, well, I'll go on to that into the next slide. So this was the setup that we looked at for Martin. So because of his physical access requirements, he needs a grid pad. So Martin was still able to use touch initially, but as his condition deteriorates, his touch was getting more and more difficult, less and less controlled, and he was tiring quite easily. So we went with the GridPad 15 with eye gaze so that he could control the device with his eyes. One thing that was really actually quite difficult to work with is Martin used a CPAP machine to control his breathing. And I don't know how many of you have worked with eye gaze, but it can be quite temperamental in terms of having good access. It needs to be in a good position. You don't want reflections and interference with eye gaze, because that can make access quite difficult. So the good thing about the grid pad is you can actually take the camera off, and grid is compatible with lots of different cameras. So there's a number of different eye gaze manufacturers out there, and the reflections on Martin's CPAP machine were causing interference with his eye gaze access. So we were able to try a number of different cameras on the device, and ended up settling with a camera that worked really well, despite the fact that his CPAP machine was covering some of his eyes. So that was the device and access method that we settled with. And then we also looked at grid with Fast Talker. So Fast Talker is the content. We're going to have a look at that now. And what that enabled him to do was, so we spoke about the fact that he wanted to be able to keep in touch with his family, his sons. So grid actually enables him to pair his phone, so he can make phone calls from his grid pad. He can also send text messages or WhatsApp messages, and keep in touch with his sons that way. He also had the functionality for message banking, and I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with message banking or voice banking, but it's a project that's run in the UK in particular and the US, which allows people to preserve their identity. So voice banking is where you record an entire voice. So you can use a voice that's personalized to you. That's quite intensive and takes quite a lot of recording. And of course, if people are losing the ability to talk, they don't always have the time to record a whole voice. So we also have functionality to record messaging clips. So Martin actually recorded some clips for his wife in particular. So going back to maintaining the relationship with his wife, Martin recorded some phrases, and I think they pulled some from video clips that he'd done in the past as well, actually, saying things like, I love you, just saying, morning, darling, things that his wife were used to hearing. And it was quite emotional knowing that he wasn't going to be able to say those things anymore. So message banking allows you to continue using the voice through the device. And it also worked really nicely with the dogs. So his dogs obviously were a bit confused by a device that was speaking. So we recorded some phrases of Martin telling his dogs what to do. And he was able to use those with his device when he deteriorated and was no longer able to use his natural voice. We used the recordings in Grid. So let's take a little bit of a look at what that looks like. Okay, I'm looking at Eva now. Can you see Grid on my screen? Yeah, cool. So this is Martin's user in Grid. Oh, flicked onto my main screen. Let's flick it back over here. Okay, so this is Martin's setup in Grid. Okay, so in Grid, we have what's called Grid Explorer. And Grid Explorer is like the home page within Grid. And then you have what we call grid sets, which make up all the different content within Grid itself. And those grid sets will be personalized to the individual. So you'll never go into someone's Grid Explorer and it'll just be exactly the same, because you're working with different individuals with different needs. So Martin's setup involves a grid set that we have called Fast Talker. Fast Talker is quite commonly used with people with ALS because it's nice in that it has everything they need all in one space. So a lot of what Martin required from his device, we can access in this grid set. So some of that functionality, ooh, go away. There we go. So some of that functionality we're going to look at now. So we've got the chat pages in Fast Talker. So this enables Martin to type out what it is that he wants to communicate. And it's got prediction, which we'll look at later on. And it's also got chat history. So it's got phrases that he said a lot before. So he's got this page to instantly communicate. Some of the other things that we spoke about that Martin was interested in was phoning his sons. So Grid actually gives you the capacity to pair a phone. So most smartphones will work with Grid, iPhones, Android. It just requires a Bluetooth connection. And once you've paired the phone in Grid, you'll automatically see all of your call history, all of your texts, they'll all sync. So Martin can then use eye gaze, or if he's got a bit more energy in the morning, sometimes he uses touch. He can select it and then make a call through Grid itself. And then equally, he can use his voice, or if he's particularly tired and needs to use Grid, he can then speak on the telephone using the chat pages via Grid. So he can make phone calls this way, and then he can also answer phone calls and make text messages. So his inbox for his text messages show here, and then he can reply to text messages, send new text messages, etc. So it's that functionality he needed to speak to his sons. We spoke about message banking and the fact that he could record messages. So he can independently choose to record a message. So, for example, one of the ones that I said he used with his wife was "I love you." So he just types in what he wants to record, goes to next. He records his phrase, which is "I love you." Then once he's finished, he saves and finishes, and then he can just select that phrase and use it to communicate with his wife that way, and then also with the dogs. So he had a whole folder of different commands for the dogs, like sit, move. I think move was one that he needed to use with the dogs quite a lot, getting under his wheelchair. But yeah, it gave him the opportunity to keep his personality in his device. So not using that computerized voice all the time. And then the one other thing I mentioned about Martin was the football scores. So football was a big love of Martin's, and being able to access those football scores was really important. So we have web access in Grid that allows users to access the internet using whatever their access method is in Grid. So for Martin, using his eye gaze. And we actually programmed his favorites. So as you can see here, so that the football was at the top of his favorites. So all he needed to do was select football, and it brings up all the scores and all the information that Martin wanted about football. So that's just an example of some of the things that Martin really wanted to be able to do and how we were able to do them in Grid. Let's go back to, yeah, we're here, aren't we? So that was Martin. Again, any questions, feel free. So now we're going to look at Maria. So Maria, like it says, she was 4. She has never used any type of kind of automated voice output before. She'd only ever used printed symbols to mainly request things. And I think although that's great, this is something that we see a lot of in terms of individuals being given the ability to request. And we know that whenever we communicate, requesting is just a small part of what we're communicating, why we're communicating. So it was really important that we get Maria past that stage of just requesting and get her onto other forms of communication. So we were really excited to see how that was going to start to unfold. So Maria has a diagnosis of autism. So she has, and part of that diagnosis was that she had no functional speech. What was nice about Maria is she had a really supportive family, so that makes implementation and using the device so much easier when you have the buy-in from the family, which is so important. So for Maria, we wanted to express her needs more than just requesting to play. She's just a little girl. She wanted to be able to play with her friends, with her family, whilst being able to communicate. To participate in family life and to learn language. She's only 4, so she's already missed out because she's not able to communicate the same way that her peers do, or a typically developing child. So yeah, we wanted to give her the opportunity to learn, really learn language. So let's look at what we did for Maria. So when we went into the session, we were able to immediately engage with Maria using a grid set that I'll show you in a minute. We were building towers out of building blocks, and we were using the communication aid alongside the building blocks to make it really fun, really engaging. And you can do this with any kind of games that any children that you're working with enjoys. But Maria had building blocks and she loved to build towers. The taller the tower, the better. The bigger the tumble when the bricks come down, the better. The more exciting, the funnier it is. the more she was engaging with selecting things on the device. So yeah, so we use the touchpad for Maria, which is our Windows Surface-based device, with grid, and we used a number of different communication grid sets, which we'll look at in a minute. But we think immediately Maria responded to using the device, and I think part of that is the excitement of hearing the voice. So selecting it and then hearing the voice, it was so much more motivating than just a card with some symbols on. And we were instantly seeing engaging. There was actual eye contact from Maria when we were using the device and the play activities. So yeah, there was an instant engagement that we didn't have before when we were just using the paper resources. So yeah, it was really important to have a clear voice output. Like I said, there was no functional speech there, so it allowed her to be understood. So it helped with a lot of that frustration that she had. Interactive learning games, which we'll look at, anti-glare, quite easily distracted, Maria was. So anything that we can help to keep that engagement and prevent any distractions, such as the anti-glare, it can't be underestimated. Also, a fast processor, again, very important for Maria, because she easily got frustrated if people weren't understanding her, or or the device wasn't responsive. Then you'd start to see that frustration and it would quickly break down. So really important. And then also the ability to personalize. So when she was seeing the engagement and the interaction from others when she was making selections on the device, it just shows the importance of her being able to share her news, her information about herself that's relevant to herself. So we can quite quickly update grid and make it personal to her, so she's able to engage more. So yeah, let's take a look at Maria's setup. That was Martin's user. Let's go into Maria's. Okay, so I'll show you the activity that we started with. So it was a play activity and we did building. So this was the activity that we used initially with Maria, and where we saw her really engage and were really motivated to communicate. So when we were building the tower, we were just talking about what we were doing. So we were commenting on it, we were requesting, we were engaging, and here we go. So when we were building with her, should we build a big tower? A big one? Really big one? Okay, let's build a big tower. And then we were saying, will you pass me that brick? Can I have that brick? Here's a brick for you. You place that brick on the tower. And she was instantly starting to um, engage with us by selecting again. So we'd knock the tower down and it was again. And then she was selecting big, big. We were adding bricks and she was like, big. So then we quite quickly got to 2-word formations. So we were requesting a big tower and she was able to select big tower. So we're very quickly building on the communication that we were having with her and really motivating her to go further. As you can see, there's not many cells on this page. So what we did was we actually went back and we quite quickly increased the vocabulary that was available to Maria by going to the larger cell count. And what we're going to do later as well is we're going to look at a little bit about editing. So just because this is what's available here doesn't mean that you can't edit it and change like some of the labels so that they're more personal to the individuals you're working with. Another thing that was really important where with Maria was because she'd been so used to using these printed symbols, They wanted to continue being able to use the device in lots of different settings and really immerse her in all this new language that she had available to her. So the really nice thing about Grid is you can print any of the grid sets that you make or any of the grid sets that you're working in. You can print the grids and you can have like a low tech version. So they would print one of the activities that Maria really enjoyed, printed it, laminated it, had it stuck on the wall all around the house, by the toy box, by the toilet when it was bath time. There was one laminated, and if you wet laminated paper, I don't know if anyone's ever done it, you can stick it really nicely to tiles. So they would laminate one about bath time and then stick it to the tiles in the bathtub. And they were able to communicate and play at bath time, really immersing her in that language. So yeah, that's a really nice option that they chose here. Again, Maria had the option for personalized news pages, so we'll look at that a bit later when we move on to editing. But some of the other things we had was these uh, interactive learning games. So the interactive learning games are really an introduction to using an AAC device. So as you can see, we've got cause and effect games, we've got choices games, challenges and visual scenes. And what was really nice for Maria was she was able to then take these take the device and then actually go off and do a little bit of exploring on her own and get to learn the device and how it works and how Grid works, and that if I press something, something happens. So we've got a number of different games which are all included within Grid. I'm going to go with Dilbert the dog just because Dilbert's my favourite, just to show you. So here we've got an animated Dilbert. And then we've got the cells around the outside that when selected, we've got these animations here. So we're really starting to learn how to use our access method. Making AAC a fun experience. And then we've also got the chat pages, and these are consistent across all of the activities. And it gives us a choice, gives us the opportunity to also use this as a communication opportunity. So specific to Dilbert, but then also they've got consistent ones across all of the activities. So if we go robo snail, for example, we've got, oh, maybe I've broken that one. That was a rubbish example. Go magic piano. We've got the consistent vocabulary as well as ones which are more specific to that activity. And like I said, we've got a number of different levels. That one was based on the symbol talker one. So this layout is very familiar if they're already using the symbol talker communication grid sets, which we'll introduce you to also shortly. Again, giving the opportunity for communication, to comment, to talk about the activity, to express opinions. And yeah, really encourage that opportunity to communicate. So there's lots of different activities there, which I recommend exploring. They're a big winner with a lot of individuals. Okay, that is Maria. And then we're going to finish the case studies with Sophia. Sophia is 15, your typical teenager, I think it's fair to say. She has a diagnosis of tetraplegic cerebral palsy. So all four limbs are affected, but her hand use, she has some dexterity in her fingers. She has speech, but it's often, and her family can understand the speech, But for anyone that isn't familiar with Sophia, it's very difficult to understand what Sophia is trying to communicate. So it was really important for her to have a way that she can communicate with people that she's not familiar with, carers, for example. Sophia works with a number of different carers, and sometimes the turnover of carers that she works with is quite a lot. And that them having to learn how she communicates and what she means has been quite difficult. So having a device that allows her to communicate consistently with all of her carers was really, really important. For here, she loves Instagram, Facebook, anything social media. Sophia was very interested in. Texting friends in particular was a big one for her. In fact, when we set her up with a device, I think it was like 2 months after having the device, they had to increase her phone contract because she was texting her friends so much. She was like maxing out her phone contract. And it was really nice that she then had this functionality that she hadn't had before. And she was so popular. And yeah, just participating in daily life. She is a fierce, young, independent woman, and she just really needed that functionality to be herself. So we'll look at how we were able to do that. So Sophia used a GridPad 12 with switch access. She used 2-spec switches for increased efficiency. And like one of the things to note for Sophia in particular is that she got through a number of switches. There was a number of different type of switches that we used with her to really understand which ones suited her best. But also because she didn't have the fine motor skills, that she was quite, because of the spasticity, wasn't able to control and broke quite a few switches. So the good thing about the GridPad 12 is all the switch ports are reinforced. So the number of switches that were being plugged in and out all the time is no problem. And they've also got labels on the GridPad 12 so that the people supporting Sophia knew exactly where her switches should be plugged in, because quite often we end up with power cables in the switch ports or headphones in the power port. But we've got some nice labeling solutions for the GridPad 12, which has really helped. And then the option to test switches in Grid as well. I don't know if you've ever worked with switches, but when you get through as many as Sophia did, it's useful to be able to go into Grid and see that the switch is actually working or whether the switch is broken. So yeah, that was really useful. So she used a combination of symbol vocabularies and text vocabularies. She's in that transition period, with accessible apps being the most important thing for Sophia, being able to access Facebook, being able to access Instagram, WhatsApp, to communicate and be up to date with what her friends are doing. And then also Grid phone for texting, personalizations were really important to her. She had a particular band, which is her favorite band, and that had to be the background on her grids everywhere. So Grid actually has the ability to edit a grid set and then apply the background across all of her grid set, luckily. So I didn't have to go and put this boy band on every single grid set. So that was nice to be able to do that. I think she would have everything pink if she could as well. And then also the ability to remote edit. This was hugely important to Sophia because, like I said, she was a fierce, independent young woman, and taking her device off her to edit and make these changes for her would leave her frustrated, I think it's fair to say. But Grid offers functionality so that if I wanted to edit Evar's grid pad, for example, or Evar's grid, he could just give me access, add my email address, and then I log into my account, see Ivar has given me access, and then I can actually edit his grid sets without having to have his device in front of me, without having to take his grid away from him. I can make changes, and then his will automatically sync, and you'll see those changes appear. So it's a really, really nice functionality. It's automatic, so I'm not having to sync it myself, or he's not having to sync it himself. And it's just meant that she can keep her independence whilst having all these personalizations that she loves. Okay, so let's have a little look at Sophia's setup. Where is grid? It is here. Okay. So Sophia. So as we mentioned before, accessible apps was a massive thing for Sophia. So there's a number of different accessible apps available in Grid, which are all available free of charge. So all the grid sets that we look at today and all of the grid sets that are all available there free of charge. There's only a number of grid sets like there's very few grid sets that need paying for, and they're additional providers. So for example, Pod, I'm not sure if Pod is, you're familiar with Pod, but that would be an additional purchase. Everything else is included within Grid free of charge with those monthly updates that we talked about before. So all of these are available. So one of Sophia's favorites is a new release of ours is Instagram. I haven't set mine up with Instagram. So, but once we're signed in with Instagram, she's able to scroll, like, comment on all of her friends' posts, have them read aloud to her, which again is quite important for Sophia as she is coming around for literacy. She's also got the opportunity for Facebook there, so she can share posts, like posts, write posts, all the things that teenagers like to be able to do. And then also WhatsApp that save her mum paying her phone bill all the time from all the texting she does normally. So she has WhatsApp there, and also Spotify, being able to listen to music, make playlists, play playlists, etc. And I will just comment on this as well. So Sophia is a mixture of she's a mixture of symbol user and a literate user. So she sometimes uses symbols, and this SMS grid set allows the SMS inbox to be shown symbolized. So that's really supported Sophia in moving to literate grid sets, is the ability for her friends to text her. It comes in symbolized. She can see it. She can compose her message using symbols and then reply to the message. But then when she's trying to improve her literacy, she moves away from symbols and uses it without. So we've got both options available, which she definitely takes advantage of. And then also we've got this vocabulary here that she uses, which is a symbol communication grid set, which is aimed specifically at teenagers and adults. So it's all vocabulary around schools and college and university and going to the pub, you know. So it's stepping away from that children's vocabulary that is in a lot of other symbol grid sets. Okay. That is Sophia's setup. So that's all on the case studies. So I thought now we would take a quick look at grid in general. And we've got some of that's the wrong one. Let's open the right user, Emma. Estonian webinar, there we go. Okay, so when you make a user in Grid, you have the option to choose which grid sets you would like to add. So for the purpose of this, I've added all of them just so you can have a little look. Like I said, everyone's Grid Explorer will look different because there's different grid sets that are going to be useful to different people. And you can add as many grid sets as you like. You can remove them. You can add them again. That's, again, one of the beauties of Grid. So these are just a number of different grid sets that are available as standard. So the Symbol Talker range is a symbol communication package that starts at a lower cell count. So symbol talker A is has the least number of cells, and it moves up to symbol talker D, which uses the same type of vocabulary and the same semantic layout, but just builds up the cell count to a larger cell count. And Envaru have already done some translation work. So here is the Estonian translation of symbol talker A. And while we're talking about that, I just want to also, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say about this translation, Ivar?
Yeah, a few words.
Yeah, go for it.
Actually, it is very easy to translate this page, and it takes only, I think, only 1 day to translate it.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow, that's
I mean that if you take all workday,
yeah,
then yeah, you can do it with 1 day.
yeah, that's really good. Um, So you can see we've got special pages here as well. So we've got some of the accessible apps built in. So you've got the opportunity to take photos. I'm not going to put my camera on because it won't work because I'm using it for this presentation, but also the opportunity to go through the photos, play music. So we've got some accessible apps there as well. And just to give you an example, if we go to the pages that I said that I'd use with Maria, if you wanted to translate some of these activities, so you knew that you were about to work with a user that really likes trains, let's say trains. If we wanted to go onto the trains page, it's very easy to translate this page. So Grid is very similar to Microsoft Office. So if you've ever used Word or PowerPoint or anything like that, it should be easy to grasp. So to access edit mode, we just go into the menu and you've got this option to edit here. And that turns it into the editing mode for you. So you can make changes. So for example, if I wanted to translate this, I just select one of the cells, and then I would write the Estonian, which I don't know what that is. So if I just write hello, for example, quite easily, it's just changed the word. Just go through and change all of the words. And then when I click save, it saved all of my changes and those have been translated. Obviously, you know Estonian, I don't, so excuse my ignorance there. So very easily able to change and customize. And while we're on that as well, Grid supports a number of different symbol sets. So I think, did you use PCS? I think you guys use PCS, yeah. So this one is symbol sticks, I believe. Oh, it's widget and symbol. Oh no, yeah, widget. Sorry. But we also have these available in PCS. So if you wanted to use the PCS version, like I mentioned before, you can add grid sets anytime. There's no limit. You can just add as many grid sets as you want, explore what's needed for yourself. So we come to this add grid set window. We've got symbol communication here. Supercore is what we're using at the moment. If we go to Supercore Learning, there's alternate versions here, and you can see there's a PCS version there. So you don't have to go through and change the symbols as well. There might already be a grid set that's available for you to translate, and it saves you having to do it from scratch. So yeah. You can quite easily change the colouring. So I mentioned before about the background. So for example, if you're working with someone with visual impairment, or you're working with someone like Sophia who wants everything in pink, to go into edit mode, you can quite quickly change the background, for example. So if we go for a pinky colour, and then apply to all grids. I think my computer's had enough. It says you can't run grid and do a presentation all at the same time. But yeah, you can quite quickly apply those changes to the whole grid set. So we quickly update the colors. If you're working with someone who needs smaller text or larger text, you can quite easily change that on all of the cells. But if we just change size, for example, if we need really large text, update, and it will update all of the ones that are that style. So yeah, it's really, really quick and easy to make changes and edit those grid sets. And I realise we've got to 2 o'clock already. So I don't know if anyone else, whether anyone had any questions. I guess this works when
Yeah,
you're...
actually, I have one question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please show how to do a blank page.
Blank page. Okay, so I'm not going to save all those changes. So when we go to menu and add, so you've got the option for all the standard grid sets here. You even have an option to search online grids. I mentioned the community before, so you can search and people have saved and uploaded things on there. But you also have an option for new. So you can create a brand new grid set from scratch, as many cells as you like, whatever symbols you like. You can create one this way. So if I create a grid set, I can choose an image. Okay. And then when you open it, it's got nothing in it. So you go into editing mode, and then you can quite quickly populate it with text commands that do exactly the same as all of the commands that we've just looked at, and create your own vocabulary. So quite quick and easy to do that. And I'm saying all this like you should know it quite quickly, but there are so many resources on our website. We've got really easy lessons to follow. So it's lesson 1, creating a grid set. Lesson 2, like it goes through things step by step. We've also got lots of webinars available. Yeah, and if there's anything you want to know in particular, when we do the competition, if you write it in there, we can always pick up and contact you and get you the information you need to do what you need to do. Right. So is there any other questions? No? Okay, so this is your opportunity to win a copy of Grid. So there is a QR code there. So if you just scan it with your camera on your phone, that should work. If you don't have it, I'm just going to bring up the link. I might have to just, and I'll paste it in the chat for you. And you can follow the link. So yeah, either scan that QR code, or I'm just about to paste the code in the link in the chat rather. If you follow that link, fill it in, you will be in with a chance of winning a copy of Grid. Okay. So thank you very much for listening. I would really recommend joining our Facebook community. So if you just go on to Facebook and you search Smartbox Community, like I said, it's a community of professionals, parents, users, Smartbox staff, lots of different individuals. There's lots of questions that go on there about how to use Grid, how to do certain things, like there's random things like setups that people have done. They share videos and case studies. So yeah, I'd really recommend joining that if you can, but feel free to reach out to me and let me know if you have any questions, if I haven't answered them today, and hopefully that's been really useful.
Okay, thank you, Emma, for
You're welcome.
explaining and showing the Grid 3 software.
No, thank you for having me.
It was great, and I hope that all participants got also good overview. And if they have any further questions about software, then they can freely contact to Inmaru.
Yeah. All right, I'll stop sharing. Yeah, thank you so much for joining. I'm excited to work with Enviro more and see how we can get grid in Estonian.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.